So we thought today that we would show you guys the follow-up form, and let's see, find my notes. Also talk about, show you some architecture diagram drafts that we're working on, and then have a little bit of talk about unit test coverage. So let's see. First of all, are there any questions or announcements? Can everybody hear me?
Drew,
I
I
can
can
hear
hear you
you.
fine. I
Awesome.
can hear you.
Thank you. So I'm going to make a new follow-up form for this patient, hopefully. Wake up. There we are. So let's talk a little bit first about what the follow-up form is. The follow-up form is for, well, follow-up exams, basically. So as I understand it, and I am happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, whenever the patient comes in after the first time and after the baseline CT exam, a follow-up form is filled out to talk, well, as you can see, to provide some of the information that may have changed since the intake form. Now, the follow-up form has not changed very much at all from LCAP's forms. This is one that I expect that we will be making changes down the road. But for now, this is what we have. Is it clear then what this is for? Okay. Well, if nobody has any questions, we'll just go through and see. So we'll make the follow-up day today. Uh, okay. I think we have an error here. Well, today is 10:10.
Yes, we do, and I reported it in JIRA.
Thank you. Okay. I don't remember what the date of the baseline CT is, but I can go and I can see. So we'll go with 9/4/2018 for the baseline CT. And as you can see, this new form that I've made is here. And it shows as incomplete because I haven't put anything in it really. One thing I do like is that even if you don't put it in the exact format, as long as it's one of the standard formats that's close, it will convert it. So I didn't put in the zeros, for example, and I didn't put in the 2-0. Um, so as I understand it, eventually some of these things will be pre-filled. Like I believe once you put in the ordered by, if they have a national provider ID, then it should be filled in. But that is not. That's for a later version. Okay. We're going to say that even though this guy had his baseline CT scan and there was something questionable on it, which is why it's only a month since he's had his baseline, he still hasn't got around to quitting. Oh, ha! Something new that I just realized. This is, we had wanted to add the date of birth, the age, and the gender, and now they're there. So I'm pretty happy about that. So if anybody wants me to put something different, let me know. I'm just making this up with my non medical knowledge.
Linda, this is Claudia. Can I make a comment?
Of course.
Linda?
Yes.
So these things should always be relative to the last CT they had, not just in the past year.
Ah, good to know.
So since your last CT.
Right. Right. Okay. And that makes total sense to me.
Okay. See, like you say down there, since your prior CT scan has any.
Yeah.
Maybe that we didn't
Right there.
correct that on ours, whatever. We need to check that on our follow-up form. Put it back on mute.
Okay. So that's what's up on what's on the follow-up form is basically answers to some of the questions that were on the intake form and any changes since then. Clinical information here will be copied to the CT report. So that's just like the intake form. And let's see if I manage to answer everything and if it will let me submit. Ha! First time. Okay. So Claudia, do you have anything in particular you would like to say about the follow-up form or plans?
I think she's on mute.
Yeah, I think she's on mute.
It left and didn't tell me how to get off.
There you are.
No, it looks good.
Okay.
So that follow-up form is very important because that's what they fill out each time they come back. It doesn't matter whether they come back in 3 months, 6 months, whatever time they come back after that first baseline CT scan, that's what they fill out.
Okay. Well, as I understand it, there will be some changes to the intake form, And I was wondering if those might eventually inform changes to the follow-up form.
Well, I thought decided that when the physician or something else that gets entered initially in the intake form, if that changes, it's made in the intake form.
Uh-huh.
So we do those changes, so it has to allow changes.
Right.
The intake form has to allow changes. But the follow-up form, it relates only to all of the clinical things of screening.
Excuse me, we're ordering pie because that looks so good. You want?
Ah, okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments about the follow-up form?
So what's the next form that you're going to work on?
I don't know. Oh, the intervention form.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is Rick. Rick Avila. So, yeah, all we're doing on the intervention form is putting some tabs there that we've discussed before, Claudia. So I think there aren't any major changes occurring there.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to make sure that it's that's probably the one that we will review very quickly next week. I think it is.
And then I have the separate pet form, or is that what are the other forms that still need to be done?
Well, just to be clear, we're not showing forms as they're getting done. We're going back to forms that have been done for a while. So
right.
The forms are pretty much done except for changes now to intake and intervention.
And is the
But we don't see the intervention form up here.
Well,
and that's why I'm asking, what about the PET form or the biopsy? What do we decide to do with that?
Are those going to become part of the intervention form, or are they going to remain their own forms?
Well, that's what I was asking, what the overall decision was. We were saying the biopsy form.
We're trying to reduce the number of changes, so we're trying to keep things as they are unless there's a really strong, compelling need to change.
Okay, I understand that, but then there needs to be a biopsy form and a PET form still, along with the information.
We have them.
Linda, show the list of forms. You can show it right here. Please.
You can't.
I was trying to, but it doesn't look like GoToMeeting and Safari are cooperating on doing that. I can read you the list.
Then select each one in turn so we can see it in the box.
Okay, well, there's the screening background. CT eval.
Okay.
Follow-up. Biopsy.
Okay.
Intervention. And PET evaluation.
Okay.
So those are the ones we have.
Okay. Oh, great. So you have all the forms. I think that's it.
Yeah, we just thought it was necessary to use these calls to do a little tour because, we spent so much time working on them that as they got wrapped up and finished, we never went back and said, let's all take a tour together and see what we did.
Okay, and so then the next step would be the reports, right?
Those are in process.
Yeah, they're actively working on that right now.
Right. The intake.
We have a call tomorrow. We have a call tomorrow at 11, right, Claudia?
Tomorrow at 11?
Yes.
With us?
Oh, to discuss the reports.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I'm talking not about the report generator. I'm talking about the report.
Oh, the user reports is what we're calling them.
User report.
Yeah, we're working on those as well. I believe there were 7 that we had.
Yeah, we have a list of 7 reports we're working on.
And,
okay.
Yeah, and we're going to hit the enrollment one first, if that's not done already. But we're expecting that should
So you have
go.
we came up with a common, an agreed upon calling them, the way that we call them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We have your list of
Okay.
names for them. But we have some questions, so that's why we wanted to have a call with you tomorrow.
Okay, good.
Cool.
You could show your chat now, Linda, and show the list of the user reports that we're now working on.
Okay. It'll take me a sec because I'm not always.
I think you can just read them. It's okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
But, this
Participant for the participant follow-up report, the activity report, not only CT but all follow-up recommendations. I have a question about that. We just went through the follow-up form, and there was no recommendation for follow-up on the follow-up form. Would that
because
be
it always comes from the CT form.
right? So it said, but your comment on an activity report is not only CT but all follow-up recommendations. What other place it could have come from?
Well, no. So there's a confusion about the name. I mean, if the CT says biopsy, that should be on that activity report. If the CT says PET scan, that should be on the report. If the CT says the word follow-up is the wrong word here. Well,
and I guess to elaborate, our current, we also wanted it to capture other things besides CT. So like if they came in for a biopsy, that should be listed on the activity report.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so
any action, it really means any action on a person.
right.
So I should have said not only CT but all recommendations really.
Well, for us, it's what do we have besides CT, biopsy, and PET scan? I think those are the three we have.
The intervention may have some additional. Well, no, not really. The intervention is the intervention. So other than the CT,
biopsy and PET,
and the biopsy form and the PET, right? That would be it.
Those would be the three. Okay, fine. So the activity report will have those three.
Okay.
Then we have a missing image and CT evaluation report.
Let me show you the current follow-up CT eval follow-up section, because there's actually a list here. Can you see that?
Yeah. So any of those should be anything that any recommendation you make should be on that report.
Right. Other than, of course, no further follow-up.
As long as they put a date in there. If they don't put a date, if they don't put a date, should I put on what basis should I put it in the form, in the report?
So there should be an approximate follow-up date on that CT, right?
Right.
And that's the date that gets associated with all of those?
Right, okay.
Okay.
So should that be required field?
Yes, it should be.
Okay.
Unless it's no other further follow-up, I would think.
No. Well, somebody stuck that one in. I wouldn't have, but maybe for the VA, we don't have that form because we say that everybody comes back for annual. So.
Okay. An annual isn't on the list there, actually.
If it says no further follow-up, then there shouldn't be a follow-up date.
Okay. I see.
All right. So can you share what's in the? Can people see what's in the chat?
So by the way, on that date on the CT form, if you said I want it now, you have to look at the calendar and figure out what today's date is.
I don't think so. Ooh.
Or that little box you have next to it, is that really a calendar? That little box
Yeah.
there, is that a... Okay, so perfect. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. And it looks like, yeah, this is probably related to that other bug because it doesn't like it if you say now.
No, you have to look up the calendar. That solves it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So George, are you
Well, you still haven't. Can you? No, we're not done. We haven't gone through the rest of the reports. I would rather have them on the screen. So they're in two of your chat windows.
okay?
They're in your Skype chat window and they're in the GoToMeeting chat window. So either one is fine.
Yeah. I just I hadn't cleaned up my computer, so there's a couple of screens
But do you
I
want to
don't
wait
want to
until
share.
tomorrow? You want to wait until tomorrow?
No.
I'm hoping tomorrow that we can focus on just the CT, on this report generator for the CT eval. Okay. Because that's a topic unto itself.
So
if we
let's
can make
go on, because then I might be called out any moment.
Okay, good.
I have no choice in that.
Right. Well, the other ones I think are easier. Getting the definition on activity report was very helpful, and we'll try our best to get what you need in it. Missing image and CT evaluation report. I'm basically going to look for a follow-up that was due, that there's no CT evaluation. There's no CT evaluation form filled out. So then that's what'll go in that report.
And then if there's a CT evaluation and no images, then it would list that.
I don't know if I have access to whether there's an image or not. That's a good question. We don't.
At least not yet.
We don't right now. For the first version, we don't have a way of knowing what images are in the system.
So then, what I suggest is that you call it missing CT evaluation and image report. So you put the image after the CT.
Will do. Okay, then the incomplete form report is any form which on the case review page has the word incomplete, which means that the submit button was never pressed and you couldn't pass the edit, so the form didn't have the required fields. They'll appear on that report.
Okay.
Outreach report. This is the report for people who said that they were that maybe later on their intake. They said that they might be interested in a CT evaluation later. They didn't say yes. They didn't say no.
Right, but that report should tie in. Okay, so that report. Wait a minute. That's because that has nothing to do with the screening system. That should be kind of segregated.
Okay.
That it's not. That it's a separate report that's put in for the VA.
Based on their
well, but we've captured this information. We know which patients said in their intake form that it wasn't a yes, it wasn't a no, it was a maybe later, and we need some way to summarize those.
Right, but that report really should be tied to that intake form.
Right.
Not here. These are all screening related issues.
I thought we were going to put them on the home page like LCAP does, and you'd have a.
It's a totally different. It's not related to the screening activity.
Okay.
It should somehow be more. It should be segregated.
Okay, we'll segregate it.
Enrollment, all the other reports are related.
Okay, so that one will be segregated. Then we have the enrollment report, which is all individuals who enrolled during the specified time period.
Okay.
And by enrolled, We mean that they had a CT evaluation ordered.
No, they clicked that enrollment, right, where you enrolled the patient?
They,
This is based on we
if on
had to
the
come up with a definition of
if on
enroll.
the intake form they said yes, they're willing to submit to a CT eval,
Right.
and
Okay.
then we'll put them in this report.
Right. But if they said
Okay, so
no, then they would be enrolled.
I'm thinking those two last reports maybe should be more tied to the CT or to the intake form, or somehow segregated that they're really.
That's fine. We can put them in any way you want. We can make up a we can put, you know, 2 drop-down boxes for reports on the home page, one for scanning, you know, screening related, and one for population management, or I don't know, intake.
Yeah, because it'll be easier to teach people what to do with what.
Okay. That hasn't been implemented yet, so we can give input into how it's done. So.
Okay. Well, great to see the progress on the reports.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited. Okay, anything else regarding the user reports? I think in that case, Rick, are you ready to show?
Certainly.
Okay, give me a sec here to. There you go.
Arted to be in charge of this end. And thank you very much for all your work again.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Okay, for this section of today's call, we're talking about the overall architecture of the system. And to that end, this is because we're working on the manuals that are going to accompany the software. And as part of that, we're also working on how do you introduce people to this software and how it works. So, you know, obviously the initial introduction focuses on the value proposition, the opportunity to help reduce lung cancer mortality and how we go about it in general. But once people start becoming interested in installing the software, one of the things they want to know is, well, where does it get installed and how does its workflow relate to our existing workflow? So we're starting a series of diagrams. We're going to write some text to go with them. This diagram. None of what I'm going to show you is etched in stone. These are all first draft diagrams. So one of the things we're looking for is feedback about clarity as we discuss it. We already have some changes planned from a review we did earlier. But I'm going to walk you through these 3 diagrams anyway as an opportunity for us to have some discussions about how the VA PALS architecture relates to the architecture that the VA is already using. So on this diagram, one of the things that we're going to want to change right off the bat is this VA PALS Nurse Navigator workstation. Because what we want to do is draw a distinction between which of these things are computers and which of these things are software, hardware versus software. So what we're looking at here is a sort of a picture of the systems and software that are involved in what the Nurse Navigator does when they use VA PALS. And so we have 3 computers, 2 of which are servers, the existing VA Vista Live server, which is the medical system of record. And at present, the only other computer that they're using actively is their workstation, the Nurse Navigator's workstation, which they use to run CPRS. So this stack here is sort of what's already here, and the workstation communicates over the RBC broker. So what we're adding to this is 2 things. One is we're adding a VA PALS server, which is an indexing system for the medical system of record. It's where we index and collect draft information so that it can be moved into the Vista server, the medical system of record. And then we have new software that also runs on the Nurse Navigator's workstation. That's launched out of the CPRS client off the tools menu. and that communicates with the VA PALS server over web services, and is used to fill out the forms and generate the reports. And one of the things that can be done with the user reports, which are those are the ones that are the copies of the forms, is that they can copy. Or no, I've got it backwards. One of the things they can do with the forms reports is that they can copy and paste the text of a forms report into the CPRS client and use it to fill out a note, a TIU note, so that it can be filed into the medical system of record. Now, our long-term plan, and it's not that long-term, but let's just say long-term enough that it's not in the first version that's going to be used, is that no copy and paste would be needed to get that information, most of this information into CPRS, that instead the VA PAL server would be communicating over the RPC broker to the VA Vista Live server, so that when you submit a form, if it's complete, it could then be submitted directly through remote procedure calls into CPRS. And we are a long way down that road. We've got a lot of that software working. It's not all working yet, and it's not all fully tested. And we're trying to make sure we get the security in place before we try to commit to that. So we're going to say that our first version will be copying and pasting the forms reports into the Vista server through the CPRS client. So this is the initial configuration that a nurse navigator would be dealing with. So that means this bidirectional arrow, for example, is going to, we're in the next version of the diagram, we're going to split this into two arrows, one going one way, one going the other, so that we can gray out the arrow that shows data being pushed into the VA Vista Live server and say that's after the upgrade. But we are drawing demographic data out of the VA Vista Live server now and putting it into our indexes so that we can present it properly inside the VA, so we can use it in the VA PALS client to have selection lists and the like. So this is our first architectural diagram, and before I go on to our second one, I guess I'd like to pause here and see if people have questions about any of this. Is any of this confusing?
Hey, Rick. This is Sam. Would you mind telling me what's exactly new here? Why it looks like you're implying the Nurse Navigator workstation already exists?
Well, it does, but at present they only use it to run CPRS, right? I mean, the people who already are in the VA are currently using their workstation for CPRS, and it'll get double duty. It'll be a workstation that's used both for CPRS and for the VA PALS.
So the box should really just say workstation. It's not really used for VA PALS right now.
Well, not until after we install, but then.
Yes. Okay. Good. Yeah. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I find it a bit confusing here. Okay, sure. Good. And it talks to RPC broker, and let's see. 1010. That's correct. That's correct. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Drew, do you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, Rick. So who is the audience that this is for? It seems very computer development oriented. Would it be presented to clinicians?
This is going in the technical manual, and depending on demand, we may repurpose it for other things. But the primary place that this is going is in the technical manual. So it will be read by developers, system administrators, ISOs, people like that.
So probably not clinicians. I'm just thinking if it is clinicians, they might want to see the Nurse Navigator workstation at the top, because that's kind of what's outward facing, and then underneath it, all the bowels of how this whole thing works. Just an idea.
That makes sense. Yeah. When we get to the second diagram, you'll see the issue, and the issue is that for the radiologist, it's a somewhat more complicated situation. So we'll come back to that. That's good feedback. Linda's capturing that. Other questions, comments, or concerns, Drew?
No, that was it. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else have questions, comments, or concerns about this diagram before we go to the second one? Hearing none, let's look at the situation for the radiologist. Now, part of what this diagram is for is to provoke feedback, because I'm not a radiologist. I don't use a radiologist workstation. I have talked to radiologists, and so I'm working off of memory here, from how I understand the relationships work. But let's talk it through. In the manuals, each of these will be accompanied by text, and we're going to write the text partially based on our understanding, but partially based on feedback that we get from presentation today. So you can see here a little more clearly why we put the workstation where we did on the first diagram, because effectively this diagram adds a new stack to the left that interacts with a number of the existing elements. So for example, the PACS client software that the radiologist runs on their workstation runs side by side with the CPRS client and the VA PALS client. They're all running off the same workstation. And it's the thing that's getting access to the PACS imaging server and making it come up onto the workstation, that little body of software that they're running. But as part of that, it's also, if I understand correctly from the discussions that we had at the Phoenix VA, it's also where the radiology report is filled out and filed at present. When the radiologist fills out the radiology report, as far as I understand, they are not doing that directly in CPRS. They're doing that using a proprietary PACS client, and it's filed into the PACS imaging server database. And that there is an HL7 interface that is being used at least at Phoenix, but maybe elsewhere as well, that runs between the imaging server and the Vista Live server to push the results, the filled out, finished radiology report into Vista through the back end, so that it shows up in the client, the CPRS client, later as the finished radiology note, the radiology report. My understanding is that that's the route that's currently taken for putting the radiology report into the system, that it goes through this proprietary software and through the back door into the server. Does that contradict what anybody on this call understands? So on the basis of that, for our first version that we're deploying, just like we have other forms reports that are being copied and pasted into CPRS by the Nurse Navigator, so too our CT evaluation report has a CT evaluation, our CT evaluation form has a CT evaluation form report that is all text that's generated, so that it can be copied and pasted directly into that PACS client, so that the radiologist doesn't have to type all that by hand. The form effectively has pre-formatted it all and laid it out for them. And then they can make whatever adjustments they want to make and do the signature and file it with the PACS imaging server, whence it then is transmitted directly to the Vista Live server over the HL7 interface, which, now that it's in the medical system of record, allows it to come up within the CPRS client as a radiology report. That's my understanding of the workflow for how the radiologist will use this system. Drew, does this fit with or not fit with your understanding?
No, it looks just about right to me.
Okay. What about the Mount Sinai folks? Is this matching you guys' understanding as well?
Matches what my impression of it.
Okay, good. I wanted to confirm all that before we before we got much further. So that means a couple of things. So our plan for the first version for the Nurse Navigator, I'm going to go back a diagram so that I can compare and contrast these two with each other. Our plan for the first version is that they're copying and pasting forms reports into a TI unit in CPRS, and that's how it's getting filed into the medical system of record. But we're a ways down the road of making the RPC broker connection between the VA PALS server and the Vista Live server work, so that at some point the Nurse Navigator will no longer have to, in some future version, not the initial deployed one, but in an upgrade to come, the Nurse Navigator will no longer have to copy and paste from the VA PALS client to the CPRS client. When they press submit, eventually it will file directly into the Vista Live server. But our challenge here for the radiologist is that because this is proprietary software, And because it's going the way that it is through the HL7 interface, and because the PACS imaging server is treated as one of the medical systems of record, we can't bypass it. And it doesn't have RPC broker calls for our VA PALS server to invoke. So we don't have a backdoor way to file a finished or nearly finished radiology report directly into the PACS imaging server or directly into the Vista Live server. As far as we can tell, it has to go through that PACS client, which means at present, we don't yet see a way around copy and paste in the long run to get the radiology report into the system. If we learn more that reveals some way that we can get both medical systems of record updated properly according to the proper flow that's more convenient for people, then of course that's what we want to do. But this is our current understanding of what's allowable under the legal medical framework and workflow that the VA radiologists go through.
So I wanna ask. I mean, I don't really know what people in the VA use. Maybe different VAs use different things, but there is a Vista. I seem to remember that there's a Vista RAD client that's basically used to look at the images, and the PACS system in Vista imaging, its role is to store images, but it's not. I mean, just temporarily, not for not for the medical record, basically. So your PACS client is really not it's not something that's actually used as a system of record, so to speak. The system of record is still Vista, and Vista RAD has access to the reports in the radiology package and so forth. So I'm not sure if that clarifies things or muddies things, or if my information is out of date. I'm really not sure.
So yeah, it's a good point. Early on in my discussions with the VA radiologists, I tried to make distinctions between the PACS server that is just serving up images and there is a proprietary radiology system. And there's two primary brands that are used in the VA. And this is where the radiology report is being done. It's where the electronic signature is being entered and other things. There's more than imaging going on this other proprietary system. But when I tried to use a name other than PACS for this second radiology system that is a partial system of record, the radiologists all got confused. They said, well, we all call that the PACS server too. They call the whole system the radiology PACS system. So I ran into a problem where if I tried to get too precise in my use of the language, then I lost the target audience.
Yeah, I honestly don't think. I don't really know. Last I know, and again, somebody on this call might know better, but last I knew was basically that the PACS, the actual report text, and if that's what we're interested for, and anything that contains report text was actually entered into a Vista system. It's not in a non-Vista system.
Right, but they signed it. The actual electronic signature code was not entered through CPRS. It was entered through this proprietary client.
Yeah, but okay, I'm not sure if we have the same meanings for proprietary. So. The VA RAD, I don't think is actually proprietary in that sense. It's proprietary in that it might control proprietary controls, but the source code is available potentially, and it could be modified by the appropriate maintenance team, if that's the idea.
Yes, this is again we're talking about two different systems that I'm only showing one box for here. So you're talking about the PACS system itself and the VA RAD client. I'm talking about the proprietary software that they bought from a vendor that has its own server that they run a client for that allows them to type in the radiology report and enter an electronic signature code and submit it, which is different from just the imaging display.
As I said, I'll plead ignorance. I really don't know. So
it seems to be complicated. This is the one thing that all the radiologists could agree on is it's a bit messy right now. So So this is definitely a diagram we're going to want to refine more as we get more information. I'm hoping to arrange a tour at VA Puget Sound, which is, after all, just a few miles away from my office here, to spend some time with them and have them show me exactly what it looks like, so that maybe we can do a refinement of this diagram that has, God help us, more boxes, but all properly labeled. So that we can see what all the elements are, and also I'd love to replace that term proprietary with, so what are the brand names of the ones that are actually out there, so that it makes it a little easier to talk about which client we're referring to. We'll find out if it's possible, for example, to get a screen capture using test data of what it looks like when they're filling out and signing a radiology note within that proprietary client. That'll help us, I think, to see this better too. This whole area just needs to be developed more in terms of the documentation. But what it comes back to is, as far as we know at present, we are compelled to copy and paste the data into that proprietary client for doing the radiology report. All right, so to go back to kind of what Drew's suggestion was earlier, the whole reason we didn't put the workstation on the top in the first version was so that on the second diagram, where the workstation is in the middle of a very complicated array of things, it's easier to see what are the new parts introduced by doing radiology as opposed to being a nurse navigator. Now, that might not be as important. It might be that we should still do the diagram differently, but just that was just the reasoning that went into it. So we'll prepare some new drafts of this for you to review next time. So these are the two workflows as far as we know. These are our two primary target audiences for the VA PALS client, the nurse navigator and the radiologist. There is a third target audience, which is the VA PALS system administrator. And hi, Ardit. So we will at some point work on diagrams for that role as well, so that it's a little clearer kind of what are the moving parts. But that's going to involve popping the hood, since that person is responsible for upgrading the software. So I don't think either of these diagrams or one that looks like it is really going to do the job. So let's turn to our third diagram. As we've been talking with the St. Louis and other folks about the possibility of installing VA PALS at their sites, we've talked about the fact that they're going to need to get some servers, some rack-mounted servers to install. And we've been doing some discussions last week and this week about what the specs of those servers ought to be, what their capabilities need to be. So we worked up this is a little extract from the previous diagram. It's only got 3 of the boxes, and it's blown one of them up big, which is, so what is the VA PALS server? What's actually in that box? And this is not the configuration that's currently at Phoenix. The Phoenix configuration was our first stab at taking our development environment and deploying it somewhere else. But if we're going to do real production, then we want real production level quality protections. And so we're modeling this on the way that we protect Vista, that we've protected Vista systems since time immemorial, since we know that that works. So generally speaking, what we're talking about is a pair of rack-mounted servers, one of which spends all its time just copying data over from the other, so that if the primary fails, we have a failover server that is an exact copy and that could pick up users immediately. The goal is no more than a few seconds of downtime at maximum. So in order to make that happen, we have the scenario where we have a failover server that's running a copy of the primary server. And then in addition, even though our first installation is going to be about getting the live environment going, after that, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, over time, is upgrades. And the upgrade process is trickier than the install process, because when you're doing an initial install, nobody has any data they care if they lose. I mean, there's nothing there. We're installing for the first time. It's greenfields. Not greenfields, upgrades is a much trickier situation, because you don't want to accidentally delete people's software. Now, granted that the medical system of record is the Vista Live server, and we're pushing all the essential data over to the Vista Live server, nevertheless, it would be extremely inconvenient to trash all the indexes that we're building to run all these forms off of. So for that reason, we're following the same pattern with our VA PALS environments that the VA does with its Vista environments. We're going to have a test environment and a live environment. They're going to run side by side. In this case, because of the way that the the load works on these systems, we don't have to separate them onto different computers. They can be on the same computer, and each one will have its own backups and journaling running, and that way. If we're talking about Phoenix VA and Phoenix VA, Pee-wee at Phoenix VA is using the VA PALS client and therefore is using the live environment on the primary server, the VA PALS server, we can, in parallel with that, be upgrading her test environment to install. Arctic could be dropping in an upgrade to the test environment, and then Pee-wee could try it out. She could connect her client to the test environment instead of the live environment and see how she likes the upgrades. And if there's something catastrophically wrong, she can tell us, and she still has her live environment doing things the way that she likes. So this is a really important part of ongoing configuration management, to make sure that we've got both test and live side by side. And so that way she can also use the test environment not only like a feedback environment, but like a training environment. And make sure that when she gets to the point where she's comfortable with all of the upgrades and she likes them, then she can say, okay, let's go ahead and upgrade the live to match test. So this gives us our staging area for installations, for testing, for training, and so forth. And it gives them to us in a completely protected way, so that the primary server could take a bullet and completely die, and we'd still only be down for seconds because the client could switch over to the live environment on the failover server. So this is what we're talking about doing. This is what the basic stack looks like within the quote-unquote VA PALS server, in order to make sure that it is just as protected an environment as we expect within VA for production systems. So questions, comments, or concerns about this?
I have a comment.
Shoot, man.
One thing that we've done a lot that's worked real well with the primary and secondary thing you got going on there.
Yeah.
Is to have the test environment be on the secondary for the live environment, and the live environment, and vice versa. So that you're not running two primary instances on one server.
Sure, that makes sense. That's a great idea.
And then it kind of spreads that load out, so you don't risk any sort of pollution of the live environment with whatever you're doing in test.
Right. So then the test environment on the primary server ends up it's actually shadowing the test environment on the secondary server, which is where test is mainly doing its work. I like it. Yeah, let's do that. We're gonna modify that. That's great. Great idea, man. What else? What else struck you?
Nothing from my end. Everything else looks great there to me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Questions, comments, or concerns from other people on the call? Well, then here endeth my portion of today's discussion. Thank you, everybody. I'm turning it back to Linda.
Thank you, Rick. Well, we only have 5 minutes left, so I am inclined to leave the unit test coverage for another day, especially since we don't have Joel Ivy on here today. He's on vacation. I guess when you're retired, you can go on vacation anytime you like.
He's on the Oregon coast.
Yeah. So, any other comments or anything like that before I say goodbye?
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.